taught with methods appropriate. So let's just say AM, appropriate methods. And what was the other thing?
Significant effort. So.
Oh, okay, a significant effort. Okay, then they will.
Broad mastery.
They will have a broad mastery. Okay, so say B. Okay, so appropriate methods, efforts, and then broad mastery. That's a premise, right? Thus, if such broad mastery is not achieved by the students in a particular secondary school. Okay, so if we don't have broad mastery, then those students are not being taught with the methods appropriate. Oh, not appropriate methods. Wait a sec. Now, what is the contrapositive of this?
It would be not AM. I'm sorry. Yeah, not AM or not SE.
Yeah, so not B, right, would lead to not AM or not SB. I think I would do this first so that now we're talking in the same language, right? So then the conclusion was not B leads to not AM. So how can you draw this conclusion when in reality the premise only supports the idea that not B leads to one or the other? You have to be assuming that not SE is not an option.
Okay.
Because right now, like if this is all the information we have, right? So based on this information alone, if you don't have B, then you don't have this or you don't have that. So, but if we were told that the students are studying, what was that again? Significant effort. They are engaging in significant effort. Then you would know that this is not a possibility. So
Right.
it must be that one.
Right.
So that's the missing assumption right there.
Okay, so the missing assumption is that there's no significant effort.
That there is significant.
That there is significant effort.
Because not B is going to be explained by either they don't have this or they don't have that.
Right.
But if you found out the students did have significant effort,
then you know for sure.
Then you have to cover that up because that's not a possibility.
Okay.
So then it'd have to be not AM.
Okay.
So I think the key here is to find the contrapositive of this first. So then you're dealing with the same like kind of wording, and then say, oh, okay. Well, the only way I could prove that this leads to that is to get rid of that option. Because right now we have two options.
Yeah.
So we want to say, no, that's not an option. And to say that's not an option, you just have to say, this is not SE. So we want to say, no, they did do SE.
Okay. I mean, I went into it knowing that there was something with the SE related, but the answer choice added AM after mastery.
Oh, let's see here.
I'm sorry, after methods, I guess.
Oh, I don't know which one is the answer, but A looks sort of tempting, because that's saying that if they, as long as is the same as if, so if they have the appropriate methods, then they will definitely do SE, right? That's what that's saying. So if, then you can't say that they didn't have SE and they did have AM, because then AM would force them to have SE. So it must be true that they didn't have AM. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
If this is saying, like if we step back and think about it intuitively, this is saying, hey, look, as long as you have appropriate methods, the students are going to come through for you in terms of significant effort. As long as your methods are good, the students are going to engage with significant effort.
Okay.
So if there was not a broad mastery, then there must not have been appropriate methods. Because if you had had appropriate methods, you would have also had significant effort.
So the whole thing is trying to force it so that you always end up with not AM.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if this is true, then
essentially the contrapositive, I think that leads to the answer.
If you don't have SE, then you don't have AM as well, right? So then, regardless of whether you didn't have SE or AM, you would not still have AM. But I think if you can also just think about it intuitively in the sense that if appropriate methods would guarantee that the students exercise significant effort.
Mhm.
If there wasn't a broad mastery, then there must not have been appropriate methods, because appropriate methods would have taken care of everything. In other words, if you had had appropriate methods, you would have also had the significant effort. That's not helping it.
I mean, I get it diagrammed. I just, I don't know.
Well, okay, if we think about this intuitively, just stop for a half second, right? They're saying if you put in enough effort
Mhm.
and you have the right teaching methods,
Mhm.
then you're gonna have a broad mastery of these skills, or whatever they were saying. I don't really care too much about the details, but
Okay.
if you do those two things, then you're gonna have broad mastery.
Okay.
So if there wasn't broad mastery, then
You're missing one of those two things.
you're missing one
At
of those
least
two,
one of those
at least one of those two things. Now, if it's true that appropriate methods would guarantee that you had significant effort, then we must not have had appropriate methods, because appropriate methods would have led to you having significant effort,
Okay.
which would have then guaranteed that you would have had broad mastery. Because if you have both, right, like what this answer choice actually says is you actually don't need both. You only need appropriate methods, because that will lead to significant effort, which will then lead to broad mastery.
Okay.
So if you didn't have broad mastery, you must not have appropriate methods, if this is true, because appropriate methods is really will guarantee that you succeed.
Okay. It's kind of like tying in both of the necessaries together. So rather than having
Instead of
two
having
things
both,
to have one, it's kind of saying if you don't.
it's just saying that
both.
one of them would actually take care of both of them.
Okay.
And so if one of them would take care of both of them, if appropriate methods would also guarantee that you have significant effort, then if you didn't have broad mastery, you must not have had appropriate methods, because that would have actually made it so you would have broad mastery.
Okay. Does that come out like often?
No, that's a tricky sufficient assumption.
Okay.
So to answer your initial question,
Okay.
no, it's not common.
Okay.
It's just going to be on your test twice.
Wonderful.
Okay.